My friends and I were planning to spend a weekend in nature, in a cozy village away from the hustle and bustle of the city. After browsing through the many options on Airbnb, I found a beautiful cabin that met our expectations. This secluded retreat was located on spacious forest land, next to a picturesque lake. Photos showed off the attractive rustic interior, fireplace, and large windows overlooking the wildlife. In addition, an overnight stay at this place cost only $80, which we split among 5 guests. Without confusion, we immediately booked this lovely cabin, full of anticipation for a future weekend in the great outdoors. The Friday evening drive turned out to be delightful. As the sun dipped quietly behind the trees, we raced along the roads, breathing in the fresh air and enjoying the ride. Finally, we arrived at our destination, a cabin modestly tucked away on a gravel path off the bustling highway. Delight and general approval flowed through us as we realized that our dwelling looked even more cozy and secluded than we had anticipated. It was as if we had escaped civilization and plunged into the embrace of nature. As soon as dusk fell, we settled into the lodge where a warm darkness enveloped us. Wine, card games, and walks around the neighborhood filled the evening, giving us relaxation and the pleasure of breathing the fresh country air. As midnight approached, we were all very tired and a little tipsy. The twin beds upstairs provided plenty of room for all 5 friends, although we had to snuggle up against each other. I took the top bunk in one of the rooms and my friends settled into the other beds. As I snuggled under the warm, cozy blanket, I felt every bodily and mental muscle relax on the comfortable mattress. Outside the window, I could hear crickets singing, inviting me into a world of deep sleep. A few hours later, however, I was awakened by a sudden loud knock on the door, which rang through the hall of the lodge. My friends, still sleepy, were also awake, excitedly asking what the sound was in the night. We were in the middle of the woods, and imagining who could show up at our door at this late hour seemed impossible. As soon as the knocking sounded again, we, whispering nervously to each other, decided which one of us should find out what was going on. Reluctantly, I offered to go and check it out and slowly made my way down from the top bunk. My heart pounded as my bare feet paced the cold floor, heading for the front door. Taking a deep breath, I slowed my step a little before opening the door, and the creak of the hinges broke the dead silence. I poked my head out into the darkness and looked around the porch, hoping to see something that might give some hint as to the cause of the ringing. However, other than a black void and some shadows among the tree trunks, I saw nothing. Confused, I closed the door very quickly and turned to go back upstairs, but just as my foot touched the first step, the bell rang again. I turned around and quickly opened the door and stepped out onto the porch to look around the neighborhood for this bully. However, the only source of light was the moon, surrounding us with an eerie glow. There was not a soul in sight. No people, no footprints, nothing that could ring our doorbell at night. I fearfully ran into the house. My friends sat on the couch, excited and huddled together, trying to guess what could have been messing with us in this secluded place. We had forgotten about the dream and kept thinking about the incident. The doorbell kept ringing for the next hour, sometimes after a few minutes, sometimes after a few seconds. Each time one of us ran to check, we found no one, just emptiness and darkness. Deep in the woods, we had no cell phone signal to call for help, and no chance of leaving in a car in the middle of the night. All we had to do was wait until morning to get far away. We didn't get much sleep that night. We were all terrified of the potential threat outside. So when morning came, we immediately got in the car and headed further down the gravel road. When we finally hit the pavement of the main road, we all breathed a sigh of relief. The cabin trap had disappeared in the rearview mirror and the doorbells had stopped ringing. We decided to continue on our way until the wee hours of the morning to put this place behind us. It wasn't until we got back to the safety of the town that we felt comfortable enough to book a hotel and finally get some rest. We still couldn't explain what had happened. Perhaps someone was just messing with us, knowing when to disappear by ringing the doorbell. But we never wished we could go back and find out the truth. After that horrible evening, I prefer to stay in hotels and populated areas. I make sure everywhere I stay has a good cell phone signal in case something unexpected happens. Since then, I've been intimidated by remote huts hidden in the wilderness, despite their beauty and charm. After all, you never know what dark forces may be waiting outside the door and tormenting unsuspecting travelers. I was preparing for an important job interview in a city a few hours away from my home. To be in good condition before the meeting, I decided to rent an apartment on Airbnb in advance. After looking through the listings, I chose an inexpensive place in an apartment building near my interview location. The photos looked appealing, and the apartment had positive reviews and a high rating. I booked a room for the night before the interview and hit the road after work. Arriving in the city around 8 p.m., I quickly found a parking lot, grabbed a small suitcase, and went up to the third floor where the rented apartment was located. The landlord left me with clear instructions on how to get the keys. Opening the door, I entered the apartment. It was cute and simple in layout, consisting of a small living room, kitchen, bathroom, and 2 bedrooms. My room was clean and cozy, with a bed, nightstand, and dresser. I placed my suitcase and laid down tiredly on the bed. After lying down for a few minutes, I got up to brush my teeth and change into my pajamas, and then went back to sleep. Knowing that I needed to get a good night's sleep and get ready for my interview, which was scheduled for 8 a.m., I set my alarm for 6 a.m. The initial minutes were uneasy. I was tossing and turning, anxious about the big day ahead. But eventually fatigue took over and I fell into a deep sleep. In the middle of the night, I awoke to quiet voices coming from the hallway outside my room. I listened with half-forgotten ears, unable to make out the words, but hearing only whispers and male voices. They seemed to be trying to be quiet, but their conversation still disturbed my sleep. Irritated at being awakened for no reason, I pressed my pillow against my ears in an attempt to fall asleep again. Just as I was beginning to fall asleep, I was abruptly awakened by the voice of one of the men at the door. He uttered a phrase that made me get out of bed and listen. I thought he was talking about picking the lock and entering my room. My heart beat faster, and I immediately began to doubt my hearing. Were they really going to break into my room? I slowly and silently crawled out from under the blanket and pressed myself against the door, trying to hear their conversation. 2 male voices continued to discuss a plan of action right outside my door. Although they were speaking softly, I could hear enough to know what they meant. They were considering different ways to pick the lock quickly and silently. One of them was even telling the other how to properly pry open the doorknob to open it. I froze, listening to every word, full of terror, for these strangers assumed I was asleep and could hear nothing. They planned to break into my room while I was defenseless and unaware of their presence. I had to decide quickly what to do. I remained locked in this room with no weapons or anything else in the house to defend myself. Just myself and the flimsy lock I thought was the last barrier between me and these sinister intruders. I prayed they wouldn't try to open the door before I could act. Slowly backing away from the door, I looked around the room, weighing all the possibilities of self-defense. The only thing that caught my eye was the lamp on the nightstand. I grabbed it and pressed myself against the door, ready to strike if necessary. True, it was a weak weapon against 2 people, but I had no other. Clutching the lamp in my hand, I stood still, ready for action, and listened as they tried to open the lock. The seconds dragged on like hours, and I clenched my teeth frantically, praying that no one would decide to invade before I could fight back. And then, as the sound of the doorknob opening sounded, I instantly realized I had to act. Wrapping my arms around the lamp, gathering all the courage I had left inside, I screamed with such force that it continued to echo to the very bowels of my lungs. I yelled threateningly, "I hear you, gentlemen. You know it. I've already reported to the police and they're on their way. If you don't want to be detained, you'd better get out of here." I flinched at the fact that my voice sounded shaky and unsure, completely giving away the fact that this was a complete bluff. I hadn't reported it to anyone, but somehow it had worked anyway. I heard the 2 men mutter something, followed by the blessed sound of rapidly receding footsteps down the hallway. One of them whispered that the prodigal woman was awake and had already called the police. I listened tensely, not uttering a word until I heard the door open and slam shut again, a signal that the intruders had left my apartment. I lay in bed for a long time afterward, shaking and trying to calm my racing heart, until the panic finally receded. I didn't sleep a wink until the morning, shocked by what had happened. At first light, I hurriedly packed my bags, checked out, and headed to the nearest coffee shop to wait for my interview time without anxiety. Throughout the day, I nervously looked over my shoulder, fearing that the abusers might still be lurking nearby. Fortunately, I gathered my will in my fist and successfully made it through the interview. However, this horrible experience with the Airbnb system ruined all plans for a simple work trip. Why I didn't call the police right away, I don't understand. I will never again book an accommodation at random without researching the area properly, that's for sure. And I'll certainly never risk staying alone again. That call was clearly enough for long-term discomfort.